Aloha, I'm Diane Wilson from the Hawaii Writers Guild. Welcome to our first episode of Write On, a series of tips, instruction, and inspiration for all of you writers out there. Today's topic is memoir writing. And with us to share her knowledge about writing an outstanding memoir is Virginia Fortner. Welcome and thanks for being here. Virginia, when someone wants to write their story, what are the key elements they should consider?
Well, it is good to be here, and I think I'll start by reminding us that memoir is from the French word reminiscence. It's personal memories related to our own experience, usually first person. Maybe tell you what a memoir is not before we get into the elements. It's not a short personal essay. It's between 2,000 and 5,000 words. And it's not an autobiography or a 1, 2, 3 chronology of an entire life, because that is an autobiography. So the key elements are, I was thinking that you told us that before, but you didn't, Diane. So here we go. Theme, conflict, writing style, and truth. That's what I picked up to talk about today.
Excellent. Well, let's start with the first one then, which is theme. What exactly do you mean by that?
Okay. Readers long to be changed by your story. And so they have to relate to a theme, and your story needs to show, not tell, what that theme was that runs throughout it. To give you a small example, my son did just a bound memoir when he went to Alaska and worked in a fish cannery and played football with the guys that were working there that only spoke Spanish and that sort of thing. And so his theme was also the title of this, and it was called Salmon Season. It was just one slice of his life. So you choose a theme that starts where you were when something you're talking about happened, and then you show how you were changed by the end of the memoir. You select anecdotes, riveting details, side stories that back that up and put the reader right there in your shoes. A couple of examples come to mind. I read Bossy Pants by Tina Fey. And again, that title of that one pretty well gave away the theme. And she showed her relationship with being bossy, if you will, or in charge. And then Me, an Old One by Katharine Hepburn, got me so excited about how she lived her life, and that theme of growing up kind of coddled and well and being the center stage, and then using that throughout her life. Made me watch every one of the old Katharine Hepburn movies last week. You can start with a childhood memory. A lot of people do. And I'm thinking of Michelle Obama's book. It's an autobiography, not simply a memoir. And I think that probably that one started with a chronological kind of feel anyway. To sum it up, if you want a theme and you're not sure what, think about if I said, you have 15 minutes, tell me what makes you, you. I think you'll find a theme.
Excellent. Good. So then let's move on to the next element that you mentioned, which is conflict. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, you want to create a kind of emotional journey for your readers. Notice I keep talking about the people who are reading it. It's about you, but you want people who read it to relate to it and be captivated by it. So you look at your emotional journey, you look at where you were and where you have come and how you got there. An example would be people who write about being a victim. of maybe abuse or something, and then how they came to acceptance, or maybe an addict and how they came to healing. Those are rather dramatic ones, I guess. But look at where you started. Be sure to mine your pain that was there so the reader feels that too, and then move through to the resolution. Give them hope.
Yes, good. Okay. And we need that in these days. So, okay. So our viewers are probably more familiar with the concept of writing style, but what about writing style makes for a good memoir?
I think the first time I ever wrote anything in first person, and it may have been a true memoir, it may have not been, it may have been a fiction that I put some of what I knew really well and what I'd learned in. Probably I thought that was all there was to memoir, was writing style and a chronology of a life. Not very interesting. So you're not simply reporting a life. With writing style, you're focusing on a phase or a time or a place or a recurring kind of behavior. You make your reader care as you plunge into trouble, and then you show them how you get out of trouble. The backstory can be introduced subtly. You don't need to give too many details in the beginning. I might give you an example of backstory that would come later by reading you a couple of examples. I published this small collection, which turned into a kind of memoir, but not the one, two, three that I'm telling you about here. I did it only for my family, and I put stories in there that had to do with my mother, stories that had to do with me. So it was a collection of poems, personal essays that ended up a family memoir, they call it that. This is Imbler's, which was my mother's maiden name. When I think of Imbler, Mom's family name, the tune of I Am a Rock, I Am an Island rings in my head. It didn't occur to me to feel the loss of my grandmother I never knew when I was young. The 400-mile car trips to western Kansas to visit Dad and the boys, Mom's phrase, came in frequently, and their individual visits to us in eastern Kansas bring even fewer impressions. Then I tell about my grandpa sitting on a stool in the kitchen without saying a word while my mother cooked. So they get a picture of the silence and some of the things that were withheld maybe in that story. Here's another one. This was about me and my horse. This memory is not fleeting. Some say nothing really important happens after we're 12. Others contend that life's direction is formed before we pass 6. One part of mine froze at 5, the summer I claimed a sorrel with one white sock as my horse. Fleet lived up to her name as she, head in the air, tail in the air, raced around the upper pasture before thunderstorms. And I then get into what life was like when I was 5 years old and with this horse. So later, you can put in those details that you withheld at the beginning, and it's much more important, keeps your reader reading.
Mm-hmm.
Other writing style, humor. That's a really important one. And Diane, you know about this. I've enjoyed a lot of your Hawaii sagas about adjusting here and so forth. I think what I'll do is share with you something from a design of his own. I think there's a glare there. I wrote this with Mike Eaton, who had a stroke after he'd had a very large life of adventure, and a design of his own came from, he has designed surfboards for a long time, also boats and cars and many other things. And this was how I started the chapter, early years. A few years after his birth, December 30, 1934, Michael Eaton's mother told him, Halloween would have been more appropriate than a late Christmas present for your birthday, Mike. And then I went on to tell how he was always into mischief and always kind of the bad boy, but that led to this adventuresome life that a lot of people want to read. So another example that comes to mind is Toujours Provence and A Year in Provence. And that was an easy one to see the style. He used the same humor, but he kind of poked fun at himself and his wife through it because they went to Provence in France and really didn't know how to fit into this village, but he managed to tell all about everything in the village each time.
Good, excellent example. So the final element on the key elements is truth, and I'm very interested to hear more about what you have to say.
I might tell you that I'm still learning this one and did not think of it as a part of memoir. I just figured, you know, whatever you said in your memoir was going to be the truth through your eyes, and it is, except we don't want to succumb to that temptation to preach and say, now this is the way it is, or this is the way it was, and so you ought to do it this way. That will not be a good memoir and probably won't be read by many people other than yourself or someone who wants to argue. You put the reader in your shoes. You reflect on what's the takeaway message from this, and you don't gloss over this is how it was, but at the same time, showing, not telling. You can fictionalize people, or you can fictionalize descriptions. It's okay to contradict impressions of people involved. And the only thing you have to be tremendously accurate with are the historic times and the historic facts, because those are something that someone can check out. It's not just opinion.
Okay.
Don't throw anybody under the bus. If you have a point to make about someone else, find a way to do it in the memoir so that not just you're not going to get sued, but that it isn't a vindictive kind of thing. I'm going to use another example here to show you. This is the first book I published. It's called At the Edge. And many people told me that it is a wonderful chance to get to know the flora and the fauna of the beautiful state of Montana, but that wasn't my reason for writing it. I wrote it to show a spiritual journey of a man that was escaping the law. Okay. Let me just read a bit to you from a chapter and see if you hear anything that has to do with a memoir. It's also first person. No, it isn't. Third person. Ed took in the scenic panorama slowly, like the first sips of Dr. Pepper over ice. Why didn't he take time to pop open a little sweet caffeine before heading up there? Too far to hike back for it now, that was for sure. He turned his attention to the Clark Fork current pulsing toward plains below him, a silvery ribbon. On its far banks, River Road was a faint taffy line pulled between busy intervals. Upriver east, his eyes followed a turquoise water line from Glacial Flathead as it lost its color and joined the muddy Clark Fork, spilling under the bridge just before Paradise and got lost in a stand of evergreens. His eye followed it to where it irrigated an expanse of meadow and swirled around an island in the South Eddy, just below him. The heaven I used to preach about, it couldn't have been more beautiful than this, he thought, as he walked away. So maybe that will give a picture in your mind, but I will tell you that when I wrote this, I was going through a similar time. I wasn't running from the law, that's fictitious, but the fellow in here was, and I decided I would write it in third person, looking down on the scene, and also make the person a man. But it let me do a lot of my own exploring and spiritual journey myself. Did I surprise you? So, truth.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so if you've been thinking about writing your memoir, or you've recently begun to work on one, or you're just about to finish one up, keep in mind these 4 elements that Virginia just shared with us: theme, conflict, writing style, and truth. Thank you to Virginia Fortner for sharing your writing wisdom with us. And for more information about writing, visit the Hawaii Writers Guild website at www.hawaiiwritersguild.com. Thank you.
May I remind our listeners that they are the most qualified person to write their life,
Yes.
and that they need to think about who their audience is, because you'll write it differently if you want a bestseller or if you want it just for your family. And it's a lot easier to get press from memoir writing than it is from fiction. There's a lot of fiction out there that's rejected. And finally, celebrating when you finally get that thing published can be such fun.
Excellent.
Happy writing.
Thank you.